Geronimo, born Goyacla, one who yawns, June 16, 1829, was a leader of the Badoncohe band of the Chiricahua Apache. He was born in Nodoyan Canyon in what is now New Mexico, then Mexican territory. In Apache society, Geronimo was never a chief by inheritance, but became renowned as a spiritual leader, medicine man, and indomitable warrior. According to Apache oral tradition and later tribal histories, he was sought after by other Apache leaders for his wisdom and believed to possess supernatural power, even the ability to see the future, walk without leaving footprints or hold back the dawn to protect his people. His Spanish name, Geronimo, likely originated during fights with Mexican soldiers, who, according to some accounts, invoked Saint Jerome in panic as he fearlessly dodged bullets. He freely accepted that name in later life. In the mid-1800s, Geronimo's tribe straddled the U.S.-Mexico borderlands. During the U.S.-Mexico War, 1846–48, and thereafter the Apache resisted encroachment by both Mexican and American forces. In 1858, or possibly 1851 according to some sources, a band of Mexican soldiers attacked the Apache settlement at Llanos in Chihuahua, massacring Geronimo's mother, wife, and 3 young children. This personal tragedy ignited his lifelong hatred of Mexican forces. He spent the next decades raiding Mexican villages and military outposts in revenge. Apache and Mexican accounts agree that Geronimo became feared by Mexicans, who often called out, "Geronimo, Geronimo," as he evaded their bullets. Among the Chiricahua, he earned respect for surviving multiple wounds and by cunning battle tactics. By the 1860s, U.S. expansion into the Southwest brought new threats. Geronimo joined forces with other Apache war chiefs like Cochise and Victorio in a guerrilla campaign against U.S. troops and settlers who pushed into Apache lands. In 1874, the U.S. Army forced most Chiricahua Apaches, including Geronimo and his followers, onto the bleak San Carlos Reservation in southeastern Arizona. Life on San Carlos was harsh, food was scarce, and the land barren. The Apache disliked their confinement, and tensions ran high. In frustration, Geronimo led his band off the reservation at least twice. For example, when Chiricahua captives were again being rounded up at San Carlos, Geronimo and roughly 150 men, women and children bolted into Mexico in May 1885. The U.S. Army pursued Geronimo aggressively in the 1880s. In January 1884, he surrendered to General George Crook near San Carlos, but was allowed to stay on the reservation on parole. After less than 2 years, in May 1885, Geronimo again slipped away to Mexico with dozens of followers. Crook chased him, but Geronimo eluded capture with a small band of warriors, women, and children. Finally, in March 1886, after months in the Sierra Madre, Geronimo surrendered a second time at Cañón de los Embudos in Sonora, Mexico. Fearing betrayal if he crossed back into U.S. custody, he immediately escaped once more into the Arizona mountains. With the Apache War dragging on, Army command changed hands to General Nelson A. Miles. In the summer of 1886, Miles mounted a massive campaign, some 5,000 U.S. troops plus Indian scouts, in hopes of ending the conflict. On September 3rd and 4th, 1886, at Skeleton Canyon on the Arizona-New Mexico border, Miles finally secured Geronimo's formal surrender. Geronimo and about 30 of his followers laid down their arms, Geronimo purportedly at the priest's urging, saying, "Once I moved about like the wind, now I surrender to you." This effectively ended the last major Apache resistance. Geronimo was the last native leader to formally surrender in the Old Southwest. Instead of allowing the Chiricahua to return to Arizona as promised, the U.S. government treated Geronimo and his band as prisoners of war. They were transported first by train to Fort Marion, Castillo de San Marcos, in St. Augustine, Florida, arriving in late 1886. A small number were held there. Eventually, the total at Florida camp swelled to 469 men, women, and children. In 1887, many were moved to a former Indian prison at Mount Vernon Barracks, Alabama. Finally, in 1894, Geronimo and the surviving Chiricahua, never more than a few hundred in number, were relocated to the Fort Sill military reservation in Oklahoma. His people remained jailed there for nearly 30 years as prisoners of war. At Fort Sill, Geronimo tried to adopt the imposed peaceful lifestyle. He took up farming, joined the Dutch Reformed Church, later expelled for gambling, and even dictated an autobiography to an army chaplain in 1905, published 1906. However, he never ceased to identify with Apache resistance. His charisma made him a celebrity to Americans. He earned money selling handcrafts and autographed photographs of himself, and he was granted permission to appear at expositions. For example, in 1898, he visited the Trans-Mississippi Exposition in Omaha, and in 1901, the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo. In 1904, he stood for photographs at the St. Louis World's Fair, Louisiana Purchase Exposition, and in 1905, he even rode in President Theodore Roosevelt's inaugural parade in Washington, D.C. Geronimo thus became a familiar national figure, still wearing Apache clothes, bow and arrows in hand, earning extra money from audiences fascinated by the last Apache. Geronimo never saw his homeland again. On February 17, 1909, riding home from town at Fort Sill, he fell from his horse, developed pneumonia, and died. He was buried in the Fort Sill Apache Cemetery. By that time, Arizona and Oklahoma commemorated his life. In 2010, the Arizona Senate passed a resolution praising his fierce bravery in battle and remembering him as a defender of Apache people. Geronimo's long struggle made him a legend in American folklore and media. Among Apaches, he is remembered as more than a mere warrior, a seer and spirit man. Tribal sources credit him with unusual gifts. For instance, the Mescalero Apache emphasized that Geronimo was a great spiritual leader and medicine man who had supernatural powers and was highly sought by Apache chiefs for his wisdom. Popular culture has likewise treated him as a figure of almost mythic stature. He is famously associated with the battle cry, Geronimo. This cry was immortalized by U.S. Army paratroopers in World War II, who would shout, "Geronimo," as they leapt from airplanes, inspired by a 1939 Hollywood film titled Geronimo. The tradition persists in popular lore and even children's games, and was reportedly invoked by American astronaut John Glenn on his space missions. Geronimo's story also fueled a vast number of films and TV shows. As one historian notes, Geronimo has probably appeared in more Hollywood odors, westerns, than any other American Indian, including Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull. Early portrayals generally cast him as the archetypal savage villain. For example, the 1939 film Stagecoach depicts Geronimo as a bloodthirsty threat. More recent works, such as the 1993 film Geronimo, An American Legend, starring Native American actor Wes Studi, aimed for nuance. Studi himself said, "We're telling the story of Geronimo the fighting man. He was brutal. He did kill women and children. But he was reacting to the way his people were being treated by the U.S. government." Such portrayals acknowledge the violence of frontier warfare while highlighting Geronimo's motives as resistance. Geronimo's image also became a symbol in U.S. military culture. Beyond the paratrooper cry, various Army units adopted his name or likeness. For example, the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment used Geronimo as a motto. However, the appropriation of his name has sparked controversy. In 2011, after U.S. forces killed Osama bin Laden, reports surfaced that Geronimo had been used as a code word in the operation. Native American leaders, including Apache descendants, were outraged. The National Congress of American Indians pointed out that Geronimo is revered by many as a hero, and said that using his name in this way is not an accurate reflection of history, and it undermines the military service of Native people. Activist Winona LaDuke flatly stated, "Geronimo is a hero, a national patriot for our peoples. And it is indeed an egregious slander to equate Osama bin Laden with Geronimo." Tribal media and advocacy groups echoed this view, asserting that Geronimo stood up for his people and was no terrorist. Thus, in folklore and pop culture, Geronimo's legacy remains double-edged, a shorthand for daring and resistance, yet often misunderstood or misused. Within Native communities today, Geronimo is largely honored as a symbol of strength and survival. Many indigenous people view him as a hero who valiantly defended Apache lands and culture. For example, Apache activists and descendants have praised Geronimo's steadfastness and spiritual power. As university professor Susan Harjo noted in Congress, Geronimo has become a fine role model for our children all over Indian country. The Mescalero Apache, on whose reservation many Chiricahua eventually settled, remember Geronimo in reverent terms. Their official history calls him the last warrior fighting for the Chiricahua Apache and praises his wisdom and supernatural powers. At the same time, Native people are sensitive about how outsiders portray Geronimo. The wave of criticism in 2011 over the Bin Laden codename shows that for many Natives, Geronimo's name is sacred and not to be equated with terrorism. Over a century after his death, debates around Geronimo's image, whether as a heroic defender or a Hollywood villain, reflect broader Native perspectives on history and identity. In sum, Geronimo is viewed within Native America as a patriotic warrior who fought against colonization. He is celebrated for his courage, revered for his spiritual leadership, and remembered as one of the most iconic figures of Apache resistance. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.